Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Early in the morning, at the new farm, Toan quietly laid down the first layers of cement for the clothes drying area. His hands were covered in mortar sweat beading on his skin, yet his face looked strangely peaceful, as if he were slowly building a new life from the ground up. Over at the busy Tet market, Diem was hustling to sell carrots amid the calls of vendors and the flow of shoppers hoping to finish quickly so she could get back and help Toan. As soon as she got home, she hurried over, asking how things were and getting ready to roll up her sleeves and work alongside him. But right then, Thu's mother appeared at the gate carrying a small bag of rice and some food. She walked slowly, warmly, then sat down on the porch, looking around at the simple house at Toan's hands, paused mid-work, and gently asked about one small thing after another, as if the two of them were truly her own children. Just a few simple words were enough. Diem couldn't hold back her happy tears, realizing for the first time that this place truly felt like home. If you want to see how their new life will unfold, don't forget to like and subscribe to follow the next episode. At first light, while the cold still clung in a thin layer over the ground, Toan was already in the corner of the yard where he planned to build the clothes drying area. The sky hadn't fully brightened yet, just a faint pink streak slipping through the clouds, enough to catch the tiny dust particles floating up with each step he took. He rolled up his sleeves and bent down to check the ground one last time. The soil had been packed tight the day before, smoother now, but still dotted with small bumps, as if quietly testing his patience. Toan let out a breath, picked up the shovel, and began scooping sand and cement into the mixing tub. The dry clack of metal hitting stone echoed across the quiet yard so clear it felt like the whole farm was holding its breath. He poured in the water slowly. The mixture darkened, thickened, and gave off the sharp, familiar smell of wet cement. Toan worked it with a trowel mixing until the mortar turned smooth and workable. His hands were dusted white, his fingers stiff from the cold, but his eyes stayed locked in a focus that felt like someone building a place to lean on. He laid down the first coat. The trowel tilted the mortar, spreading into a long strip, filling the small gaps and slowly pulling the surface together. Each pass took steady pressure, a firm grip, a small adjustment to keep it straight. Sweat beaded at the back of his neck, even as the cold wind blew, mixing with the cement dust clinging to his forehead. Toan didn't stop. In the stillness of the early morning, his breathing and his hands fell into a steady rhythm, as if reminding himself one layer at a time, and everything will be okay. Diem carried her basket of carrots into the market while the air was still cool. The Tet atmosphere felt amplified by the calls of vendors, bursts of laughter, and people shouting greetings from one end of the alley to the other. Pale pink peach blossoms leaned against motorbikes. Bundles of green dong leaves were neatly tied together, and the warm smell of sticky rice cakes drifted through the air, mixing with garlic scallions and smoke from the food stalls along the market. People squeezed past one another, everyone in a hurry, yet still smiling. In a rush to get everything ready, happy because Tet was right at the doorstep. She found an open spot next to a vegetable stall, set her basket down, spread a thin tarp, and quickly arranged the carrots into neat little stacks. Freshly pulled, still dusted with soil, their bright orange color stood out against the sea of greens and reds from other produce. Diem wiped a bead of sweat from her temple and smiled at her first customer, her hands moving fast as she weighed tide and passed the bags over. The clatter of the scale, the rustle of plastic bags, and the soft clink of loose change made the market feel even more alive. Sometimes she had to lean aside to avoid a child darting past. Other times, she laughed when an older woman took her time picking vegetables while still calling out New Year wishes. But through it all, one thought stayed with her, clinging like a red thread. Sell faster, just a little faster. Every bundle of carrots gone meant time given back. She pictured Toan at home hands, covered in cement, bent low over the yard, working alone on the first layer of the clothes drying area. She wanted to get back while he was still in the middle of it, so he wouldn't have to carry it all by himself. So when he looked up, he'd see another pair of hands beside him helping build something small, simple, and warm together. Toan was putting the finishing touches on the clothes drying area when Diem arrived. She stopped at the edge of the yard, hesitating for a moment, as if afraid of breaking his focus. On the still wet cement, shimmering softly, Toan bent down trowel in hand, pulling the last stroke smooth. Cement dust dulled his wrists and clung to his shirt. Sweat ran from his temples down his cheek, mixing with the white powder, giving his face a look of both strain and quiet patience. Diem stepped closer and set her basket down as gently as if she were setting down a piece of care. Her eyes traced every corner of the freshly laid surface, the footprints he had carefully erased, then settled on his tense shoulders. She could tell he was slowing down, saving his strength for the final stretch, unwilling to leave even the smallest uneven spot behind. She stood beside him, leaning slightly to see better. Her voice was soft, but warm, asking how he was doing with a gentle concern, as if all it would take was a nod for her to roll up her sleeves and jump in. Her hand moved almost on its own, wanting to steady the bucket of mortar, pick up the water pail, wipe away the bead of sweat about to fall onto the new surface. Toan looked up. His eyes met hers. Brief surprise, then they softened. Something in his chest seemed to ease, not because the work was nearly done, but because she had come back at just the right moment. He glanced at the sunlight, creeping higher, at the marks the basket straps had left on her hands, then back at the cement in front of him, as if weighing a quiet choice. Diem didn't rush him. She simply stood there waiting for his answer, for a small nod that would let her help him finish the last part of their little home together. A little while later, just as Toan finished rinsing his hands to get the mortar off, familiar footsteps sounded at the gate. Thu's mother appeared, walking briskly, but steady, carrying a bag of food in one hand and a small sack of rice neatly tied and slung over her shoulder. She looked into the yard, her eyes moving over the newly finished clothes drying area, the tools set neatly by the porch, then stopping on the two young people standing side by side. That look felt like both a check-in and a quiet kind of care. Diem noticed her first and hurried over her face, lighting up. She took the food bag, then reached for the sack of rice, her movements quick, respectful, and practiced. As she handed things over, the older woman's eyes lingered as if making sure the house wasn't lacking anything, as if reassuring herself that the two of them weren't struggling alone. Toan stood slightly behind them, his back still damp with sweat, but his expression had softened. He dipped his head a little and helped with the other strap. his hand brushing hers for a brief moment full of respect. She followed Diem into the yard, looking around as she went asking gentle questions. While putting things away, Diem talked about going to the market early to sell carrots, about Toan starting the cement work at dawn, about how much of the house they'd managed to set in order. Toan nodded now and then smiling at times as if the house itself had suddenly filled with warmth. The mood between the three of them quickly grew light and easy. As soon as she sat down, the older woman looked Diem up and down, silently asking if she was tired. Diem answered with a quick smile, eyes bright, while Toan stood nearby pouring water, feeling a quiet warmth spread from the smallest, simplest moments. They sat together near the porch, not formally, not arranged just the way people do, when they feel safe enough to pause. Thu's mother took the low wooden chair closest to the doorway, setting her bag down by her feet. Toan remained standing for a moment, unsure whether to sit or keep himself busy, then finally pulled a stool closer. Diem settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a few seconds, no one spoke. It wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that comes after movement, after effort, when the body finally realizes it can rest. The yard still smelled faintly of wet cement. Somewhere beyond the fence, a rooster crowed late, confused by the changing light. Thu's mother was the first to break the quiet. So she said, her voice calm, steady, "You've already started fixing things up." She wasn't asking for praise. It sounded more like a statement, one meant to acknowledge what she could already see. Toan nodded. "Just small things," he said. "Nothing big yet." She looked at the drying area again, then at his hands, clean now, but still rough, the skin around his knuckles, pale from the cold water. Her eyes lingered there a moment longer than necessary. "Small things add up," she said simply. Diem glanced at Toan, then back at the older woman. "We didn't want to leave it like this too long," she said. "It'll be easier once there's a proper place to dry clothes, especially when the rains come." Thu's mother hummed softly, the sound halfway between agreement and thought. "You're right. Those are the things that wear you down later if you don't do them early." She shifted in her chair, resting her hands on her knees. "The house may look simple now, but it doesn't stay that way forever. It becomes what the people inside it make of it." Toan lowered his gaze, listening. He wasn't used to adults speaking to him like this, without instruction, without pressure. Just sharing something they had learned and were now handing over gently. Diem smiled, small and sincere. "That's what we're hoping." Thu's mother looked at her more closely now, really looked, not just at her face, but at her posture, the way she sat upright, even though her shoulders were tired, the faint redness on her palms from carrying baskets all morning. "You went to the market early?" she asked. "Yes," Diem answered quickly, then slowed herself. "I wanted to sell fast so I could come back." "And did you?" Diem nodded. "Most of it. Enough." The older woman's eyes softened. "Good." She didn't ask how much money. She didn't ask whether it was hard. She had already seen the answer written in the way Diem carried herself. Toan cleared his throat. "She got there before sunrise," he added. "I told her she didn't have to rush." Diem turned to him surprised. "You did?" He smiled a little, almost embarrassed. "I did, but I knew you would anyway." Thu's mother watched the exchange quietly. There was no teasing in her expression, no judgment, just recognition. "That's how it starts," she said. Two people doing too much for each other and pretending it's nothing. Diem laughed softly, her cheeks warming. Toan scratched the back of his neck, unsure what to say. The older woman reached for the cup of water Toan had poured and took a slow sip. When I was younger, she said, I thought a home was built with money. Later, I learned it's built with effort. Now, I think it's built with attention. She gestured lightly around them. You're paying attention. That made Toan finally sit back, his shoulders easing. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding himself until that moment. They talked about ordinary things after that, about where to put the clothesline once the cement fully dried, about the wind direction in the afternoons, about which corner of the yard stayed damp the longest. Thu's mother offered suggestions, not instructions, small adjustments learned over years of trial and error. Diem listened closely, nodding, asking questions. Toan added his thoughts when he had them. The conversation moved easily, like a rhythm they were all slowly falling into. At one point, Thu's mother paused and looked at the two of them together. You know, she said, it won't always feel like this. They both looked up. Some days will be heavy, she continued. Some days, you'll be tired before noon. You'll wonder why you chose the harder way. She didn't say this to warn them off. Her tone was honest, even kind. But she added, if you remember moments like this, just sitting, talking nothing urgent, then the hard days won't take everything from you. Diem swallowed and nodded. Toan felt something settle in his chest, something solid. We'll try, he said. Thu's mother smiled. Trying is enough. Just don't do it alone. The sunlight crept further into the yard, warming the cement, warming the space between them. Somewhere inside the house, a pot rattled slightly as it cooled. Life, ordinary and unremarkable, moved on, and yet in that moment, it felt like something had been quietly confirmed, not with words, not with promises, but with presence. The three of them sat there a little longer, talking until the day fully arrived, until the shadow shortened, and the morning became something solid and real. The conversation slowly drifted to a close as the morning settled in around them. The yard was brighter now, the chill lifting the cement beginning to set under the sun. Thu's mother stood up first, brushing her hands together lightly, as if marking the end of a small but meaningful pause. I won't stay long, she said. You two still have things to do. Diem rose, with her instinctively reaching out to steady the chair. You've already helped us a lot just by coming, she said. The older woman smiled. Sometimes showing up is enough. She glanced once more around the yard at the fresh cement, the simple tools, the quiet order of a place still becoming itself. Then she looked at Toan, and Diem really looked and nodded as if satisfied with something only she could see. As she walked toward the gate, Toan and Diem stood side by side watching her go. Neither of them spoke. There was no need to. The warmth she left behind stayed settling into the space like sunlight on drying ground. When the gate closed, the yard felt different, not emptier, but fuller. As if something invisible had been added, Toan turned back toward the drying area, checking the surface one last time. Diem stepped closer, crouching beside him, tracing the edge with her eyes. It looks good, she said. He nodded. It does. They didn't rush back into work right away. For a moment, they just stood there together, listening to the sounds of the farm, waking up wind, moving through leaves, distant voices, the quiet proof that life was continuing steady and real. This wasn't a dramatic turning point. There were no big decisions made, no sudden changes. But sometimes, a life doesn't shift because of something loud or urgent. Sometimes it changes because of mornings like this shared effort, quiet care, and the feeling that you're not carrying everything alone anymore. And that's where we'll pause for now. If you want to see how Toan and Diem continue building their life here, how this simple house slowly turns into a real home, don't forget to like this video to show your support. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter of their journey. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.